Before I dive in, I'm Estrada. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here. I'm on the product design team at Jane. We are right across the street. We're an online boutique marketplace that carries the latest trends in fashion, clothing, accessories, home decor. We've hosted some product Hive events over next door. This is where you can find me online if you want to tweet any questions or follow me on Instagram. I mostly just post like really silly, pretty photos, like stuff like this. When I'm not designing for the internet or trying not to rant on Twitter, I'm a very real human being who enjoys a variety of things off the computer screen. I like traveling, I like eating and eating out and trying all sorts of new stuff. On the side, I make pottery, ceramics, wheel thrown. I go hiking, try to pretend like I know what I'm doing when I'm going hiking. Yeah, plants, photos, cute shit. So why am I here? Why am I talking to you today? I'm going to start with a little quick rundown about where I've worked at and some of the companies I've worked at, and how these experiences have influenced the way that I think about design today. My career path hasn't really taken the most traditional path, and it's going to give the rest of my points a little bit of context. But so first off, I've lived all over the place. I'm from Miami. I went to school in northern Florida. I lived in New York for 5 years, worked in New York for 5 years, and lived and worked in San Francisco for 3. Now I'm here in Salt Lake. I started my career at Groove Shark, where I built up and ran what we called the digital media team. And this, I think, was like a huge foundation for basically, like, it was my design education. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we had to work with agencies. We had to work with big record labels and brands. And the team that I was on essentially built these like custom media units within Groove Shark. That was like, it wasn't like a banner ad or anything like that. It was all custom. So I think I learned a lot about design and understanding how to apply a brand by having to work with these already pre-made production assets. Some of the projects we had a lot of freedom on, some of the projects we didn't have so much freedom on, but it set me up for brand thinking and making sure that everything was consistent and followed the same cohesive story, because we were on the line with a lot of these ad agencies to do so. So because I was able to dive into like a lot of these fancy people's files, I feel like I learned a lot of different design techniques and how to replicate them by being there. After Groove Shark, which they moved my team to New York, I worked at Fab.com and then at Birchbox. So I made the jump from in-house tech, essentially ad tech, to e-commerce. At these companies, at Fab and at Birchbox, I did a lot of production work, which I learned I didn't love too much. I ended up leading a really large creative production team at Fab.com, where I worked on a lot of internal strategy and process. Fab, I mean, it's still alive, but it was like the like unicorn at the time. It was like, get on the rocket ship, we're worth $1 billion, whatever. So that's why I kind of made that jump. Oh, also at Groove Shark, we got sued into like Oblivion, and Groove Shark is no longer. So RIP Groove Shark, you see a theme. Groove Shark and Fab were not the most successful startups, but it was a lot of fun to work there. And then I also worked at Birchbox, where I moved back into more full-time design. So at both Fab and Birchbox, we worked very closely with the product teams there, making sure everything was cohesive, from marketing assets to the actual product itself, and that we were telling the same story. After Fab and Birchbox, this was like my New York stint, I moved to California. I wanted to be a freelancer. I thought I was going to be doing yoga at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and having super hippie, relaxed California days. And that's not how that worked out at all. I did all sorts of stuff while freelancing. I took on product design gigs, even though I wasn't actually an official product designer. I did branding for small businesses. I worked in-house doing short stint contracts. It wasn't for me, ultimately. I like working with teams. It's something that I very quickly identified. I was like, I like applying design strategy and tackling design problems at an organizational level, and I want to be involved in that. And so the irony is not lost on me that I worked at Asana and I'm presenting at Workfront, but I landed my job at Asana through this fellowship program that is put on by a company called Designer Fund. Essentially, it's a development program, and it's like a fellowship program for design leaders across communications and product design. So before the program was all together, now it's split up into couple different career focus tracks. And basically, they pair you with companies that you interview with, and if you land the job, your company sponsors the fellowship. So I heard about this, I was like, I don't really know what this is, but I'm gonna apply for it and see how it goes. I'm freelancing, I'm kind of open to anything at the moment. And I was in San Francisco, which, like, you know, the culture there is just like so ingrained in these like big SaaS and tech companies, and it's like the epicenter of tech and all that. I have feels on that, but I'll spare you. But through Bridge, I learned so much about product and brand strategy. It was insane. It was like a 3-month fellowship program before they separated it into these, you know, design-specific focus tracks. I got to sit through amazing product design-related talks and heard from the likes of Julie Zhu, Facebook's VR team. I got to talk to Wilson Miner from RDO, which I was like fangirling over after working at Grooveshark. Got to mingle with designers from all these top companies like Pinterest, Medium, Stripe, etc. The moment I started Bridge, I had started at Asana as a communications designer, and I'm going to use communications design and brand design interchangeably because it's essentially the same thing. It's like comms, marketing, brand that usually is bucketed into and considered like the same kind of team. Depends on where you are or what company you're at. But yeah, the moment I started Bridge, I knew that I wanted my career to steer towards product design. I had already been doing a little bit of it as a freelancer. I was working at Asana, which was, you know, a software B2B product company, and I was doing product marketing, which I know doesn't sound like the sexiest, greatest, glamorous type of design, but I actually really liked it. There were a lot of challenges and opportunities doing that. And during my last 2 months at Asana, I secured the first spot on something we called a product design rotation. And it was basically I was like on my way to being a full-time product designer there. So I'll be talking a lot about Asana and my experiences there, so more on that later. Today, I'm at Jane, working on products full-time. I moved to Salt Lake to be closer to my fiance, to be closer to nature. I really like being outside. Ever since I moved to the West Coast, I was like, never moving back to the East Coast. I love the mountains, I love exploring. But yeah, I landed at Jane doing product design full-time. We're a small team of 6, and we're divided up into experienced teams alongside PMs, engineering, and QA. And so, some of my teammates are right here. Ooh, hi. So, since we're still pretty new, and I think we're still getting our sea legs, we're still implementing a lot of new processes, and there's a lot of exciting stuff in the works. I can't divulge too much, so my focus is going to be more on the my B2B experience and while I was working at Asana. So, essentially, I went from being a brand designer to being a product designer. Brand. I never really planned to do this. This was just kind of the path it took. Everything kind of lined itself up in this way. The industry was still super new. I mean, the industry as we know it today was still super new at the time when I started at Groovejar. I had no idea that this was going to be something that I was interested in. I had always been passionate about visual design and branding and the strategy around that, but I was itching for something more. I knew I could take these skills to more than just marketing assets and communication design. So there it was. I doing product marketing at Asana really prepped me for that 2-month product design rotation there. And when I was ready to move to Salt Lake, I felt super confident in my abilities to, do this full time and kind of leave marketing and comms behind. I was like, yes, I knew that this was the path for me. It felt right. The transition has felt super smooth, really natural. Besides like small learning curves, I think applying brand strategy to communication pieces is very similar to applying brand strategy to product. A lot of the fundamentals of the design thinking are the same, just a little bit different in their application. As a brand and communications designer, the pillars of the brand strategy are what I kept coming back to as like a reference point for all of my work. They were the blueprint for success. And I'm not talking about color or a logo or like a visual like identity, but in how an experience is supposed to feel. But throughout the whole transition to product design, I kept stumbling upon something. As I talked to designers at various companies, even when I started at Bridge and I started going to more conferences and meetups and talks and really diving into this side of design, I couldn't understand why brand kept being left out of the conversation, or it was just super disconnected and removed from the conversation and the overall experience. To me, product and brand are intrinsically connected to each other. Product features and roadmaps are hugely representative of the brand strategy, and they're forefront examples of who the brand is. But user experience, to me, is not only composed of wireframes and user flows and wireframes, but instead it's a holistic experience of a consumer's interaction with a brand at every single touch point, from marketing to actually using the brand or the product. This is how I felt. This is the only GIF I'll use. I was just like, why? Why does everything look like this? Why do all apps look the same? Everything just looks like wireframes that have just been colored in. And I was like, kind of underwhelmed and not super impressed. So when I started to prepare this talk, I knew this is something I felt really passionate about and something I'm kind of always preaching, either on Twitter, Slack, or in meetings, kind of annoying about it. But because brand can be so subjective and I would venture to say we're a pretty data-driven crowd, I knew I had to do a lot of reflecting and ask some tough questions. It turns out it's actually really hard to talk about subjective things like aesthetics and feelings, especially as it's applied to digital products, especially in a B2B space. So, started questioning things. How are consumers supposed to get a sense of who the company is and what the company stands for? Why do visuals tend to take a back seat on product teams? This happens a lot. Why do we A/B test ourselves into nothingness? I've seen that happen a lot. I'll show you some examples. Does branding and visual, do they really have to be sacrificed? And why aren't our product teams talking and collaborating with our marketing and communications teams? So, product design and brand are rarely considered together as a cohesive unit that requires communication between its two parts. The disciplines are often siloed, and they're placed into these separate buckets with little to no collaboration, right? So brand is considered form; it's like the coat of paint. Product is the function, and they never really. I feel like a lot of times, brand teams will just hand things off to a product team, and there's no back and forth there. What happens as a result of that is a couple of things. So you start to lose the cohesiveness and the consistent visual design that you may have started out with. It's kind of the first thing to get compromised on the product side in favor of small details, components that you end up with components that end up all over the place. There's no real overarching view unless you work at like a huge company like Adobe, where you have an entire team dedicated to keeping things consistent. Again, little to no communication between the teams. Brand teams end up evolving a lot faster than product is able to keep up with, just because they're like, well, we got to keep pushing things, and product is never really trying to catch up. And so you end up with just a disconnect in what the user might actually be experiencing at different touch points. Good news is, it doesn't have to be like that. There's another way. What if I told you that the secret sauce is at the intersection between brand and product? So you have this like little sliver in the middle, and you have an amazing, awesome, bigly user experience that lives there. So first things first, we need to understand the primary functions of brand strategy and product strategy independent of each other. So product strategy focuses on the problems a company is solving for and how to solve them. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about product strategy. I think everyone here is actually pretty well versed in that. Brand strategy focuses on how, on your target consumer and how to differentiate yourself in the market. So, product strategy, brand strategy. How does that work in actual context when you're trying to bring the two together? So let's take Uber and Lyft. Everyone's pretty familiar with them. Essentially, they're providing the same service, but their brand strategy is completely different, and it affects their product in pretty major ways. The two companies deliver the exact outcome for an end user. The brands can change how they deliver their experiences and what the users expect and how the products are designed. But the brand obviously goes beyond the colors, the logo, the slogans, and it really speaks to the company's priorities, and I would say it even speaks to the feature priorities too. Uber, for example, launched with a black car service with professional drivers. That's, you sit in the back, you don't talk to your driver. It's very luxurious. It feels more expensive, even though it's probably not. And Lyft launched with a donation-based service. The drivers were chatty and friendly. They wanted you to sit at the front of the car with them. Same thing, completely different personalities. Creates a different product experience and design for solving the same problem. So what happens when you don't have these two things working in concert is the products can suffer from growing pains if you don't have a clear brand strategy as a guiding light. I would say that these wouldn't even be able to compete in the same market without having a different product offering and a clear brand differentiator. So what happens if you don't have a brand strategy? One really quick tip I'm going to give you: check out the 3-hour brand sprint from Google Ventures. It's amazing. It's 3 hours. If you can get stakeholders into a room to talk about this stuff, it's super important, and I promise you it will give you a better roadmap for your product. Okay. So, how did that work at Asana? How did we kind of bring the two together? So, I came in right after that complete rebrand, which gave me a little bit of a unique opportunity to see just how a brand can expand and contract over time. And so this quote is actually from the rebrand article, and I'll read it. It's, "In an ocean of bland, blue-tinted enterprise software, we saw ourselves as a magical, multicolored narwhal. But if you looked at us from the outside, it's understandable if all you saw was another fish." Before the redesign, there you go. So yeah, before the redesign, they were struggling with a major brand strategy problem. Doesn't this look like every single other B2B software out there? It was kind of lifeless, it was super boring. It wasn't exactly the like magical multicolored unicorn narwhal that they said that they felt that they were, that they wanted to exemplify. So to really like evoke any sort of fuzzy feelings or any emotion at all. Actually, I mean, I used Asana before I even got there and before the redesign, and I hated it. I was like, yeah, it works, but like, I don't want to be using this every day. If there was like another nicer option, I'd probably use it. So this is what it looked like afterwards, and like right when I started working there. We were riding on the coattails of a super successful redesign, which I'd say is pretty rare these days. I feel like whenever there's a rebrand or a redesign, everyone just kind of like attacks people, like dare I say Dropbox. I'll hold back my opinions on that. But both of our product and our brand teams are trying to figure out how to apply this new brand and how to basically how to wear it. You know, we ran into a lot of like issues, and you probably never see it from the outside, but internally there were so many times where we were like, does this feel right? Is this too weird? Is this like not weird enough? There were times where we had to like realign, revisit, come together as an entire team, and I'm talking about product and brand, and adjust for these situations that we didn't really foresee. You know, it's not just like, here's a component library, go use it, or here's a brand, go use it. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. These things kind of have like a living, breathing aspect to them. But having a strong brand identity and strategy actually helps us look back to those things for answers. So these were our brand attributes. They're kind of like, they sound like personality traits. We were constantly looking back at these for everything, for product marketing, for product, for brand. In meetings where there were disagreements, whenever we didn't know which way to go, like this was kind of our guiding light. We'd use these as like, basically like a measurement. It was kind of a scale. Was something too quirky? Was it not purposeful enough? Did this feel empowering? Was it lacking something? Was it not approachable? It helped keep us both teams on the same path, because you know sometimes the product would be not quirky enough and it would feel really stale and stiff and there was no emotion in it, and we'd kind of have to we'd diverge and then we'd like come back together. Yeah, there could have been many scenarios where we went buck wild and went too quirky, and we had to rein it in sometimes, but we wouldn't have been able to do so without having these as kind of like this is what we're looking back to. This is our kind of like our baseline. So this careful balance of balancing the traits and not skewing too far in one direction or another, and making sure that the product team knew that and that the brand team knew that, was super successful for us. I'm not going to take credit for this, but we won a material design award for best form of brand infusion into our Android app because of this. It wasn't a result of the product team working alone. It was deliberate, it was intentional, it was a concerted effort with critique from the brand team and the product team to make sure that the representation of the brand in the app felt, you had like a connection to it and it felt like our brand. So where does that brand infusion happen? It happens all over our product. And that's something that I want us to like keep in mind. Brand infusion obviously happens in the design system and component libraries. It happens in micro interactions and motion design. If you were a very quirky company, you might want your motion to feel a little bit bouncier. These are things that you need to think about, especially when you're talking about feelings and getting people to feel a certain way when they're using your product. Another thing we spent a lot of time on was illustrations and empty states. And being on the brand team, we actually have the product designers come in and give us very product design thinking feedback. especially when it came to empty states. Like there had to be a two-way street of communication there, because there was, empty states are super touchy. A lot of the times, when you arrive at an empty state, the user might feel confused, or they might feel upset for some reason, like for a forward page or whatever. Product voice. I think this is another area where we sometimes overlook things on how we speak to our product, to our consumers, like within a product, is super important, and that can carry a lot of those brand attributes as well. And feature priority, kind of like the Uber and Lyft thing. At Asana, one of our, we were like, we want to be quirky, we want to be approachable, but like we couldn't even have like GIFs in Asana, and we couldn't have, like, we had no way to bring in emojis into Asana either, and that was actually that actually influenced the feature priority. Like, we need to be more quirky, we need to be approachable. That got prioritized over some other features. Feelings. Weird feelings, feels. Your product has feelings. It can be a good one. So before, historically, we didn't really need to elicit emotion from people to get them to use a product, right? A lot of product use came from necessity. You needed toothpaste, you bought toothpaste. You needed a car, there was probably only one model, whenever the car was invented. There was probably only one model you could use anyway. It didn't really matter whether a product elicited an emotional reaction or not, right? But now we have like an overwhelming amount of choice. Emotion is a critical part of the user experience. We're constantly bombarded with ads, options. You don't like your task management tool? Doesn't matter. You can replace it. There's like 10 other options. When you think of a brand, you probably have some sort of emotional reaction to it, whether it's good or bad. It's like you either love it or you hate it. And I think being in the middle is kind of a weird place, and I think you need to be on one side or the other. So, for example, how many people here love Apple products and are like Apple fan people? Okay. And how many people are like die-hard Android, will not use Apple, forget that? Okay, we have a few. All right, cool. How many of you love Jira? Sorry, we're gonna use more task management. Anybody? Okay, yeah. So the product is gonna elicit some sort of response, right? Whether it's like positive or negative. We'd be totally amiss if we left emotion out of our product and didn't consider it as a major player in the overall user experience. More and more, I see digital products becoming devoid of emotion and personality, and for some reason, this is the part of the brand that starts to become compromised over time. How do we do that? How do we infuse our brand attributes into products to build that emotional, long-lasting connection? So I tapped some resources for this because it's really hard to talk about emotion and how to quantify it and break it down. And so there's a book called Emotional Design that's by Donald Norman. I haven't read it, but I read a great summary on it. Link is at the bottom. But I really like this breakdown of breaking down the 3 levels of visual design when you're designing for emotion. So this is in level of priority, but it kind of scales in importance. So the first touch point is the visceral level of the emotion. So how something looks, how it feels. This is kind of where I'm gonna say yeah, you should judge a book by its cover, and you probably already do. I know I do. I go to the bookstore and I leave with 4 books just because I like what they look like. I'm totally gonna read this. It's gonna be a great book. It sits on my shelf forever. But if a user likes how something looks, and this is their initial their first impression of something, they're going to want to explore more because they're I like this. This is pleasant. I feel good when I see this. The next is the behavioral level And this is something that as product designers, we tend to focus a lot on, with good reason, right? Performance, usability, basic functionality needs. Like, the product needs to work. You need to be able to understand it. It needs to be simple. So this is, it's still important. I'm not dismissing this part of a product experience at all. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is the reflective level. And this is kind of how product reflects upon ourselves, right? How do we identify with the product? Like, for those of you who identified as Apple users or Android users, what does that say about you as a person? Are you making a statement by choosing to be in this camp over this camp? By choosing to be on the Slack side versus the HipChat side? I think so. So this is the strongest argument for having brand attributes that are basically personality traits. You want your users to see a part of themselves in your product. If someone can't associate themselves with your product, they likely will not adopt the product long term. So, personality. Giving your product an identity is huge. People identify with personalities. Trust is related to personality traits. Personally, for me, I trust a brand like Lyft because if Lyft and Uber were actual people, I'd probably want to be friends with Lyft because Uber seems like kind of a jerk sometimes. And so those are brand expectations that are linked with personality. And so I hear this a lot. But it's B2B. It shouldn't have personality. It should only work. It doesn't matter if it's B2B. It still shouldn't look and feel like crap. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to make someone love the product that you're building and the work that you're putting into your product, especially if these people are using it day in and day out. When I asked if how many people love Jira, nobody raised their hand. It's like, people don't love Jira. They use it because they have to. At Asana, we knew we weren't going to match them on feature set. We didn't want to. We focused on wanting people to love the brand and using it with illustrations and these moments of delight and surprise throughout the product. Like, when you move a card over on the board, the little Yeti pops out and it's like, hey. If you complete several tasks in a row, you get this mythical creature thing, and it's become part of the Asana brand. So, my next point, have an opinion. So, is anyone here familiar with James Victory? 1, 2, okay, a few people. Okay, so James is a designer. I encourage you to look him up and watch his YouTube Burning Questions series. He's highly opinionated. I don't always agree with everything he says, but anyway, he's kind of famous, in the design scene, and I have a little story about having an opinion. For my first design talk, I went first. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I was really nervous. I was like, oh my god, I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want to say anything that's gonna make people not like me. So it was a very boring talk. It was very baseline. I wrote it so that everyone was happy, and there was no stance, no nothing. I didn't know who James was. My mistake for not looking up who was speaking after me. And he went on stage after me, and he basically gave the exact opposite of the talk that I gave, and for lack of a better word, basically shat on everything that I said. And I was just sitting there oh my gosh, what? This is so, I felt so embarrassed. I was just how, he's older, he has more experience, but I was still just part of me felt like someone had taken a knife and stabbed me in the heart. But after that day, there were people that agreed with me and people that were on his side. He's, again, very highly opinionated guy. While I didn't totally agree with him on everything, one thing stood out from his talk, and it's stuck with me ever since. And as years went by and I gained more experience, I realized that he actually had a point. And I went on to work with more designers that taught me continue to teach me the importance of this. Something he always says is, have an opinion, make work that matters. Have an opinion. With good brand strategy, your brand and your product should be able to make a stance and have an opinion on its visuals when it comes to showing how you present yourself. Don't test yourself into soulless oblivion. Are there any Hamilton fans in the room? Have you seen the play or listened to the music or whatever? All right, so I'm gonna quote Hamilton for a second. Hamilton's like the risk taker, right? He's like super gutsy. He turns to Aaron Burr, who's like super neutral, doesn't want to shake things up, and he says, "If you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for?" And I was just like, ever since he said that, I was like, yeah, like, yes, you should stand for something, and your product should stand for something. You know, while we're talking about these opinions, I realize that this statement is probably like not super popular. There's always this camp of like, visual design matters more, or testing matters more, and I'm not in either. I'm saying like, use it with a grain of salt, you know, like make sure that your brand still has an opinion and is able to convey that opinion throughout the product. So, about testing. Data allows us to be iterative with our design process, and it reminds us, and it's very humbling, that designs may not always work and they're incredibly subjective. But I think it's a little bit dangerous to only rely on data if we're talking about brand being a core part of the user experience. Relying only on data will leave a product devoid of emotion and personality. You might end up with like a Frankenstein kind of thing because one thing tested better here and another thing tested better there. Who's looking at the overall experience and making these decisions that, like, you know, this actually isn't right. I feel like there are a lot of caveats to this. I think, should something work? Yes, it should definitely work, and it should be easy to use. It should be intuitive, yes. Does it need to convert and make money? Yes, absolutely. Will testing help you determine like what works best on emails and ads, and you know what flow your users should take? Yeah, I'm not arguing that at all. But should you rely only on testing to make decisions? No, absolutely not. Designing strictly based on user testing output is a bad idea. It doesn't give you the whole story. It can give you clues. It can help you solve a piece of the puzzle, but what tests well isn't always going to be what's beneficial for the brand in the long run. So, like, for example, like, what if purple tested best, but your brand color was teal? Are you going to cause a disconnect at a certain point in the flow between what your consumer is experiencing over here and what your consumer is experiencing over there? This is something we struggled with at Asana because our marketing buttons were purple and our product buttons were blue, and it was always a point of contention, even though those were both part of our brand colors, or you know, our style guide. And so I'm going to tell you a little story about how we tested ourselves into nothingness. This is what I mean by testing yourself into oblivion. We made like 10 hero images because we really needed to test them. And I know this is a little bit marketing based, but I think it's a pretty stark and good example. We tested a bunch of images. We had a lot of things that, as a brand team, we were like, this feels good. This is the way. This is how we want to represent our brand, and this was what we want our first impression to be like. This is what ended up testing the best, and it was just like an orange gradient that says "move work forward." Like, does anybody know what that even means? Like, if someone wasn't familiar with work tracking and what this software does. We thought it was like the worst representation of our brand. Our product designers fought it, our marketing designers fought it, we kept fighting it, and we kept losing this battle. But the reason why we kept coming back, I mean, it finally changed, like right after I left. But the reason we kept fighting this is like we kept going back to our brand attributes and saying like, hey, is this quirky? Not really, it's just a gradient. Is it approachable? There's a button in the middle, I don't know. Like, what? It's not really approachable. Is it purposeful? Definitely not. Like, this is like the blandest least purposeful design ever. Does it feel empowering? Maybe the colors and the gradient give it a little motion and feel empowering, but not really. It wasn't any of these things. So I also like using this example because it's usually a resounding no. I mean, would anybody here use Comic Sans as your defining brand typeface because it tested well? Nobody? Not one person? Okay. Yeah, didn't think so. You wouldn't want to make that type of brand statement to future consumers and to current consumers. It kind of makes the argument about whether typefaces or colors or illustrations or any visual component, like whether they matter, it kind of makes it a little less silly when you put it into these terms. Another example is like if blue tested better, but literally every color of your competitors, they all use blue, like Asana, like kind of like faded into the nothingness. Would you use it? Or would you take a risk and see if another color might place you in a better position to compete? I say take the risk. Fall back on your brand strategy if you really need to justify these visual decisions. So don't A/B test yourself into oblivion. Ask questions about the humanity of your brand. And sure, something might perform better by like a tiny sliver of a margin, but question like, is that who we want to be as a brand? Yeah. Strive to be creative and innovative designers. Don't only rely on a design system or a component library. Push it, you know, push it. I feel like if we keep relying on these like little boxes and squares, Sketch is going to come out with a tool. It's going to replace all of us, and we're going to be out of a job one day. That's my dystopian future warning. A really good book that I always go back to when I'm feeling stuck or when I'm not feeling particularly like creative or innovative is Creative Confidence by Tom Kelly and David Kelly. It's a great book. It's about nurturing creativity within us all, and it goes into bringing others along for the ride. There are a lot of like really good facilitation techniques, a lot of really good individual exercises for you to do. David Kelly is the founder of IDEO. Like, need I say more? They're like the kings of purposeful and creative design and solutions. And so my last point here in the coming together of brand and strategy is holistic collaboration. It's pretty short, but I think it's one of the most important parts in getting your brand and your product aligned. Make sure your teams have what they need to stay on the same page. It's normal for brand and product to kind of do this like diverge, converge kind of action, but opening up the communication between your product team and your marketing teams is going to be so beneficial for the overall brand. Consider it this way, you're both working on consumer-facing designs. It should be a collaborative two-way street. So this is something that I've been preaching on at Jane, and I've been trying to like get us, I mean, we're already doing a lot of these things, but it worked so well for us at Asana. And I really highly encourage you guys to do the same. So schedule regular brand reviews. This was huge for us. So every month, the product design team and the communications team got together. We put everything up on these like white foam boards, and we looked at the brand as a whole. Like, what does marketing look like with the product? Where are the differences? What is working? What is not working? What are trends that like some designers are starting to explore and infuse into their designs? A lot of really good conversation came out of that. Another thing we did was open invite design critiques. So marketing and brand designers were invited to product critiques and vice versa. And designers were designers, and you know, feedback was listened to. I know this might sound like a little bit terrifying, and it might sound like, oh my gosh, how do you manage like more voices in the room? It's already hard to manage a lot of voices in a room. Having proper facilitation techniques for design critiques are key. And if you have a good facilitation technique for that, then having more people in the room shouldn't affect that. In fact, it will help. Having product design thinking in a brand critique was huge. It made me start to learn how to think and question things in a way that I probably wouldn't have been doing before. And then establish trust and these relationships. Opening up that dialogue between teams that don't really work together on a day-to-day can be scary. There's little work overlap. You guys, I mean, we were sitting on different floors from the product team, the marketing team. This is where kind of design culture as one cohesive team that's designed for a user can be helpful. So what we would do is we'd have offsites together. We'd have product designers they basically do little internal posters and stuff, and they bring it to design critique and exercise these visual design muscles that they normally wouldn't be doing in their day-to-day. We'd have critique together. We'd have lunch together. We incorporated a design rotation where product designers could be comms designers could be product designers. It was a little bit harder to pull off, but it worked. That kind of stuff helps foster a sense of trust and safety among both sides of the team, so that I felt comfortable going to a critique that wasn't part of my team and voicing my opinions. And so this is a little photo of what that looked like at a sauna. You could see all the foam core boards and everybody's running around dot voting on stuff, but it was really fun, and it really did make us feel like one team. It didn't feel like it was product is over there, marketing is over there, and we don't talk to each other. This kind of helped us make sure that our brand strategy and our product strategy were aligned. So, wrapping things up. Together, unite both brand and product. Remember that your product has feelings and it has a personality. Give it TLC, incorporate that into the product. Have an opinion and make stuff that matters. And collaborate with your teammates. They won't bite, sure, hopefully not. And then I'm going to close off with this quote by Frank Lloyd Wright. Form follows function. That has been misunderstood. Form and function should be one, joined in spiritual union. Frank Lloyd Wright, master architect. Can't take any credit for that. Yeah, thank you. I wish I had time for more questions. You can tweet at me, Slack me. I know we have several speakers coming up, and I'm excited to hear from some of them. But yeah, that's all. Thank you.